Our speaker today. So Jim Cameron was born and raised in Toronto, and he's been riding trains since he was a kid. After attending Lehigh University, he worked in broadcasting and journalism in Hartford, Boston, and New York City. Moving back to Connecticut in 1992, his choice of a home was again dictated by proximity to rail, settling in Darien, within walking distance of the Noroton Heights station. In 1993, he joined the Connecticut Metro-North Rail Commuter Council, where he served 11 years as vice chairman and 4 years as chairman, resigning in 2013. Since 2003, he has authored a twice-monthly newspaper, column, and blog called Talking Transportation, syndicated to 26 weeklies across Connecticut. In January 2014, he issued the Commuter Manifesto and launched the Commuter Action Group, empowering commuters to complain to Metro-North and elected officials using a website and social media. He serves in the Darien Representative Town Meeting, runs his town's Channel 79 government TV station, and also serves in the Area 9 Cable Television Council. Please join me in welcoming Jim Cameron.
Thank you so much for the invitation to come back and talk to you. John was reminding me I spoke to this group, I think about 4 years ago, down at Bertucci's. But a lot has happened in the last 4 years. And what I want to do in this next few minutes is to bring you up to date on this theme as I've been discussing it from first to worst. Talk about the conditions of the railroad today, why it should matter to you, because I assume you're not commuters on a full-time basis. You do take the train occasionally, I'm sure. And then talk about some of the things in the future and also have a chance to answer some of your questions as well, too. So I don't have a remote, so I'm going to keep going. Next, please. 2011, Metro-North is recognized internationally as the best commuter railroad going. They won the Triennial Brunel Award for overall excellence in railroad design. Very prestigious award. Next, please. Next. 3 years later, the FRA issued its deep dive report. Next, please. Metro-North emphasized on-time performance to the detriment of safe operations and adequate maintenance of its infrastructure. This led to a deficient safety culture, increased risk, and reduced safety. 3 years, from first to worst. Next, please. So here's Metro-North. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's not only the New Haven line that we enjoy, the branch lines to New Canaan, Danbury, Waterbury, but also the Harlem line, which runs way up to Wassaic, and the Hudson Division, which runs up to Poughkeepsie. They also have an operation that runs through New Jersey up toward Port Jervis as well, too. It's a huge commuter railroad. Next, please. So a little bit on the history of how this happened. What we have as Metro-North today is a legacy of the for-profit New Haven, Penn Central, and Conrail operations. In 1983, those all went bankrupt, and in a moment of exigency, Metro-North was created as part of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. The three lines we mentioned, next please, the Hudson, the Harlem, and New Haven. The branches on the New Haven line, we mentioned those as well too. And they have almost 82 million riders a year. The New Haven line itself is the largest, busiest single commuter line of any commuter railroad in the United States. We keep vying back and forth with Long Island Railroad for bragging rights on the most passengers, but their operation is much more distributed over many, many different lines. The Commuter Council itself, you might be familiar with. John, who I worked with for many years on the Commuter Council. This is a creation of the legislature in 1985. 15 members appointed by various lawmakers. We used to hold, and they still do, hold monthly meetings with the Department of Transportation and with Metro-North. But a couple of years, actually last year, a new council was created. Shortly after Governor Malloy came to office, I had never been one to be shy about being vocal in criticism of the Department of Transportation or the governor, whoever was in office. Rowland, Rel, Malloy, nothing partisan in my criticism. But when Malloy came to office, one of his senior elected officials downstate here took me aside and told me to stop being critical of the governor. And I said, it's nothing personal. I mean, I'm just criticizing policy, not the person itself. And he literally said to me that we can write you out of existence. We can do away with your little commuter council. And sure enough, last year we discovered that a bill had been put into the hopper without any announcement, without any fanfare, that would have done just that. Would have dissolved the Metro North Commuter Rail Council. Would have created a new statewide council looking after not only Metro North, but Shoreline East, and the new commuter line that's going to run between New Haven and Hartford and Springfield, but with vastly diminished authority and power. So thanks to John Hartwell, who went up to Hartford and lobbied on behalf of commuters in general, a new council was created that had new appointees, new jurisdiction, and after serving 19 years on the old council and being the first appointee to the new council, I said, I've had enough. Nothing personal, but I just got to the point that I felt that the DOT and Metro North were not being honest and candid with us, that we were getting a lot of political pressure, and I felt that I could do more outside than inside. So what I did was created a new group, the Commuter Action Group, which is a virtual group. It consists of a web app, a Twitter account, and a Facebook page. My feeling was that rather than having commuters on the train when they see something wrong, wait till they get to the office and write a letter or make a phone call, capture them at that moment of pain, let them open up their smartphone, go to our website, and immediately file a complaint, both with Metro North, because it's important to document that, but more importantly, to also let them share that complaint with their elected officials, their state rep, their state senator, their congressmen, their US senators, because they're the ones that the DOT really answers to. It was highly effective, especially in the past winter, which I'm sure even though you might not have been on the train every day, you heard was pretty hellacious. So the idea was to just go straight to the folks that really control the purse strings. As part of this, in my day job, by the way, I used to be a reporter. I worked at NBC News. I knew Gordon Josselot many years ago when he was with CBS as well too. So I'm pretty good at the PR side of things. For 30 years, I've run my own consultancy and I trained C-level executives on how to deal with aggressive reporters. So I've got the best email list of reporters in the state. Reporters love talking to me. You probably have seen me on News 12. I went to the oil change place the other day to get my oil changed in my car. Get out of the car, expect the guy to say he wants the transmission fluids, etc. checked, and the first thing he says to me is, I've never seen him before, he said, how are the trains? So, I'm the train guy. People come up to me at the supermarket, on the platform, you're the train guy. Yeah, I'm the train guy, all right. So the whole idea of the Commuter Manifesto was to put forth some expectations of what does the commuters want, and it wasn't much. It really mirrored the list of what we call the Commuter Bill of Rights that we wrote in the final year of the council. The right to have heat in the winter and air conditioning in the summer and a seat to sit on and information when the trains aren't working. So the Commuter Manifesto was the first manifestation of what this new Commuter Action Group was going to be. And I got invited to come up to Hartford and be on WFSB on Face the State. I thought, this is great, man. I'm going to have a whole half hour to just expound on Metro North. And I got up there and I found out that it was a 3-minute segment. So I talked fast, but I got my message out. Next, please. So let's talk about this downhill slide that Metro North has endured for the past year. May of 2013, you remember there was a Friday evening derailment and collision at Bridgeport. 2 tracks were taken out of service. The northbound train derailed on a bad insulated joint that had been inspected but not repaired. It hit, ironically, a southbound train, and there was considerable damage. No deaths, fortunately, 60 injuries. This is what the collided trains look like, an interior shot. They ironically were, brand new M8 cars as well, too. Shortly after that, there was a track worker who was working near, I think it was the new West Haven station, who was killed by one of his own trains. A novice working at headquarters training to be a dispatcher opened up a track that he shouldn't have, and the train was sent at speed into the work crew. And this gentleman, Bob Loudon, 52 years old, died. Next, please. That's the explanation. Yeah, apparently the supervisor had been out in the bathroom or a coffee break or something. He came back and found out what this trainee had done, and he fainted. He just knew what was going to happen if it hadn't happened already. July of 2013, near Westport, a garbage train derailed on a very sharp curve. Then there was last fall's Con Ed feeder cable situation at Mount Vernon, where 13 days of service on Metro North were disrupted because the power line broke and they couldn't provide electricity on that section of track. Metro North blamed Con Ed blamed Metro North. The backup system that they thought they might need to put in as a safeguard during the repair of this power line was deemed unnecessary and too expensive. To his credit, Governor Malloy pushed very hard and got something that the Commuter Council had been asking for as one of our bills of rights. If service isn't supplied and you're sitting on a ticket that you can't use, you should get a refund. We were told on the Commuter Council that that would be absolutely impossible. The governor made it happen. And people got refunds even though they had still been able to get to work by bus or other shuttlecraft, etc. Then on a Sunday in December at Westport, Sunday, December 1st, early in the morning, there was a southbound train with 115 passengers that flew off the tracks. 4 were killed, 59 injured. The engineer, who was experienced, said he spaced out. At first he said the brakes didn't work, then he admitted that he had spaced out. Well, he had spaced out and at the last possible moment tried to apply the brakes, but it would be impossible for that train to stop because it was hitting a 30-mile-an-hour curve at about 80 miles an hour. The physics just made it inevitable what was going to happen. So here's the curve. North is up at the top. That's the Hudson River where the black arrow is. Manhattan's just off the screen at the bottom, and they have to come around that curve, and you can see from the red representation of what happened to the cars. Here's the perspective from the engineer's viewpoint, and here's what it looked like. Again, north is on the left, heading south around that curve. The cars just literally flew off the track. This was a push-pull configuration of Bombardier cars with the engine at the rear. You'll notice that the first few cars have red stripes down them. Those are Connecticut cars. These are cars that run regularly on our trains. In Connecticut, they run on the Danbury branch. This accident could just as likely have happened in Connecticut as it did in the Bronx.
Jim?
Yes?
How, despite the dive last night with the garbage, was that just a half a mile or so?
That was a little closer to New York, but it was near that same curve. That was a garbage train. Yeah.
It wasn't that curve.
It was a little further beyond that curve. It was closer toward New York. Emergency workers rescuing people from the train. Oh, and then there was the episode. It's like you can't make this stuff up. It just goes from bad to worse. After they had all that episode with derailments, etc., in early January, I think it was a Thursday night, 7:45 p.m., someone from the IT department decides he's going to use that time, perfect timing, to work on the signal system, and he pulls the plug on the main computer, shutting down the signal system, shutting down the railroad. He said he thought there was a backup power supply, but there wasn't. Next, please. So trains were stranded for 2 hours at least, even though it was a cold January night. The trains had electricity, so though they were not allowed to operate because the signals weren't running, at least they had heat and lights on the trains themselves. Next, please. Oh, this is what Grand Central looked like that night. Pretty crazy. And then we've had a series of stranded trains. There were a couple of incidents in January. Next, please. Wires brought down, train struck for 2 hours, a rescue train was dispatched, no heat. Don't go too fast. Just last week, a week or so ago, there was an episode on a Friday morning at rush hour where there was a contractor with a crane who was delivering some ties at Costcob, and the crane swung and it ripped down 3 of the 4 power to the tracks, so Friday was completely messed up. And you will, of course, remember, being Westport residents, I believe it was 2012 or 2013, the hottest day of the year. It was 112 degrees outside, and the train stranded near Westport with passengers on it. As you know, our cars do not have windows that open. The wires were down, the train was stranded, no heat, no electricity, no response. The passengers were so desperate on that train that they called 911, and Westport Fire and PD showed up and started to pull them off the train. And your then first selectman was very instrumental in holding an after-action review to figure out what happened. But the point really was that the passengers did not believe at that point that the railroad was going to rescue them. They had to call first responders. Another Westport episode. I don't know what's wrong with Westport here, but it seems to be the nexus of a lot of these problems. Next, please. A northbound train hits something at night on the Westport Bridge. They stop the train, they get out, they look around, they don't see anything, so they just proceed on their way. Next, please. And next, please. And then the next morning, well, they never go notify the cops. That's the important thing. They never told local Westport PD, we hit something on a train in your jurisdiction, we didn't find anything, we're out of here, we're continuing on. And the next day, a body washed up on the river. So, Gordon, what happened with that communications in the after-action review, right? Next, please. Number of worker issues. Metro North used to have a team of mystery shoppers, people in city garb that would ride the trains and just pretend they were passengers. They would look around and, you know, ask dumb questions and present wrong tickets, just to see how the experience was from the consumer's point of view. It turned out that there was an audit by the Inspector General's office that those mystery shoppers were not riding the trains. They were sitting in their office and filling out fake reports, so the mystery shopper experience was discontinued. Then they said, well, we've got, you know, senior managers that are riding the trains, whose, you know, pictures I'm sure are up in the locker room at every conductor's room, so they know what the senior managers look like. Next, please. There were some foremen, track foremen, who were found to be similarly not doing their job. They would be clocking in at Croton Harmon. Some of them drove to Pennsylvania to buy fireworks and beer. On the clock, came back, filled out false time reports. You know, this is the kind of malfeasance that gives one pause, especially when maintenance of these tracks is something that we should be working on clearly after these accidents that we've had. Next, please. Fireworks in Pennsylvania, yep. The New York Times made an interesting comparison to the Long Island Railroad, looking at a 2-year period prior to these accidents. And I don't remember the exact numbers, I apologize, but I'll give you the ballpark. In a 2-year period, Metro North disciplined 85 railroad employees and fired 8. In that same 2-year period, the Long Island Railroad disciplined 675 employees and fired over 100 of them. So what I'm getting to here is that there has been a management problem at Metro North, the bitter fruits of which we have seen in these derailments and problems on the train. Yeah, there was a guy who was an engineering trainee on his way to New Haven one morning on a non-rush hour train, and he decided to relieve himself by masturbating on a sleeping woman in the front car. So it just like goes from bad to worse. Next, please. And it was another track death just shortly after the new president of Metro North arrived. Next, please. Sunday, March 9th. Worker on the Park Avenue Viaduct. Next, please. Was struck by a train. He was a power foreman, 8-year veteran. This is after the new guy, the new president arrived, and he promised everything would be fixed. Another track worker hit by a train. How do these things happen? Question marks. Next, please. So we have 2 federal agencies that have jurisdiction over the railroad: the National Transportation Safety Board and the Federal Railroad Administration. And you might be familiar with the NTSB in regards to airplane crashes, etc. Well, they're responsible not only for airplanes and trains, but pipelines, and all manner of transportation. And they are a very aggressive group recommending changes to improve safety. But they have to deal with, in this case, the Federal Railroad Administration, which is understaffed, overworked, and is rather slow to embrace some of the changes that they recommend. Next, please. So there are, as I say here, political and professional tensions. We are still waiting, over a year since that accident occurred at Fairfield in May, for the final report from the NTSB as to what happened. They've issued preliminary reports, but we don't know the final report yet. But the FRA, after the Spoit-and-Dival collision, decided something systemically very wrong at Metro-North, so they did a deep dive. They took all of their inspectors from all the railroads around the United States, and they put them right into Metro-North. They embedded them in every department of Metro-North. They were there at headquarters. They were on the trains. They were watching everything that was going on, trying to figure out what was happening. This is at the same time Metro-North assembled its own blue ribbon panel of industry experts to look at their operations. That group has not issued a report yet either as well, too. So that's a first, this deep dive that I quoted at the beginning of the presentation. Next, please. And the findings came out in March, and here are the findings again. On-time performance was the priority, not safety. Dispatchers were literally told to hurry things up. There was a daily review of late trains, but safety didn't seem to have the priority. There was not even a rule that stopped track workers from using their cell phones when they were on the job. You know, you're supposed to be paying attention when you're standing on the track where trains could be coming or the power could be on and not be talking on the phone. Next, please. Inadequate training, and this is a big issue, not only at Metro-North, but also the Department of Transportation, and ironically with the professional air traffic controllers as well, too. There's a whole generation of senior people that are retiring all at once. Half of all the dispatchers at Metro-North have less than 3 years experience. The Department of Transportation is losing 40% of its most senior, well-seasoned, experienced, knowledgeable engineers. And both DOT and Metro-North have known this was coming. They knew that this 30-year mark for retirement was happening, and they have not been aggressive enough at bringing newer people in over the past few years. So suddenly, a lot of people with experience are retiring, and the new people that are coming in don't have the chops. Next, please. So there was a change in leadership at Metro-North. Howard Permit, the president, I think for 4 years he resigned. Joseph Giletti was named president in February. He came back to Metro-North. He'd been there 15 years ago. In the meantime, he'd been running a small commuter line in the Miami area called Tri-Rail. He is widely respected. He issued a 100-day plan, and he came up to the Saugatuck train station and met with the commuter council and with commuters, and it was the first time I'd seen him in action, and I was very impressed. He's a no BS guy. He's got a horrible job to try to rebuild this railroad. And his 100-day plan that he announced when he arrived is going to be up in mid-June. And I've been biting my tongue as much as I can to not be critical of anything until that 100 days is up, because I think he's got a very aggressive plan to try and fix things on the railroad. One of the problems that we're having now, and just to circle back to any of you who live in Westport as to why you should care about Metro-North even though you don't ride it on a daily basis, is that the FRA has instituted slow orders. They've reduced the speed that the trains can operate in many locations, approaching and crossing bridges at sharp curves. And that reduction in the speed limit means the trains are running slower. On-time performance in February slid to the lowest number that I've ever seen in 20 years, 76%. And let's remember that Metro-North defines on time not by the departure time, but by the arrival time at Grand Central, plus or minus 5 minutes and 59 seconds. So if your train is supposed to arrive at 8 o'clock and it arrives at 8:05, it's still on time, even though when you were supposed to get on that train at 7 o'clock, it didn't show up until 7:15. So the perception of the passengers standing on the platform in the cold winter winds, waiting for a train that's supposed to arrive at 7 o'clock that doesn't show up till 7:15 is the train is late. But if that train makes it to Grand Central within that 5-minute, 59-second margin, Metro North does not consider it late. So there's a difference in perception. The on-time performance numbers that we're seeing now are coming back, but even though there was a new timetable that went into effect 2 weeks ago that was supposed to have solved a lot of these scheduling issues, the trains are still running late. Next, please. Slower running times. There's still a car shortage, standing room only conditions. On a daily basis, I get tweets, reports from commuters that are saying the 723 from Fairfield is standing room only. We have enough cars. There's no reason that passengers should be standing. They're still trying to figure out, Metro North is, how to put enough cars on each train to handle the passenger load. So these are the speed restrictions I spoke of. A new timetable 2 weeks ago. And here's an example of what this means. New Haven to Grand Central used to be an hour and 38 minutes. Today it's an hour 50, not counting 10 to 15 minute delays. Next, please. So in February, at the height of the problems, we held a commuter speak out at the Pequot Library. Not the most central location for commuters who may live in Stamford or New Haven, but we had, I would say, about 150 people that showed up. Metro North was there, the Department of Transportation was there, the media was there. God bless the media, and there's the crowd. So what does all this mean? Next, please. Train service affects people that don't take the train. I imagine that many of you live in Westport, as I live in Darien, because at some point in our careers, we wanted to move out to the leafy green suburbs and the place of good schools, but we wanted to be able to get to our jobs on time. People live in these towns because of those trains. When those trains become not reliable or run consistently late or become increasingly expensive, people look at other places to live. At the Commuter Speak Out event, there were 2 people who were realtors who said, this is in February, they said, I have lost closings in the past week by people that were going to move out from New York City who've heard all this news and now they're thinking of moving someplace else. Maybe Westchester, maybe New Jersey, maybe stay in the city. If you don't have reliable train service and people don't want as much to live in Westport and Darien and New Canaan, that means that tax revenues go down, property values go down, the cost of your school system doesn't necessarily go down, maybe taxes rise to approach those needed costs. But my point is that the vitality of these communities along the coast very much is dependent on that railroad. It's a service as important as running water and electricity, and we know how reliable CL&P is. We're feeling the same kind of pain now about Metro North. And I remind people upstate when John goes up to Hartford and begs for money to make sure Metro North keeps operating, the Mason-Dixon line in this state is the Merritt Parkway. North of the Merritt, people think, people upstate think, all you people on the Gold Coast, you millionaires, you can all buy your damn trains. Why do I need to subsidize your trains? Well, 40% of all the taxes in this state are paid by people who live in Fairfield County. And if people aren't going to live in Fairfield County, it's going to affect not just those towns, it's going to affect the entire state. I think New Canaan and Greenwich alone represent something like 15% of all the taxes in the state. So I don't mind, as a taxpayer in Connecticut, paying for the Yukon football stadium in East Hartford, even though I'm never going to be in it, see it, use it. Neither should people upstate want to or neglect investing in this railroad that is going to make these communities vital and make sure that people live here so they can pay taxes up to Hartford as well too. And I'm happy to answer any questions. How are we doing on time? Good, good. Questions? Yes, sir, in the back.
When I commuted between 1970 and 80, I always sat in a bar because more room for my legs, and I did a lot of reading out there. What about bar cars?
What happened to the bar cars? Well, the last of the bar cars was taken out of service, I believe, about 2 weeks ago. we were down to just 3 bar cars that were left. Now, the chairwoman of the Commuter Council, Terry Cronin, who works with John, who is vice chair, is probably the single biggest advocate and fan of bar cars of anybody involved in commuter advocacy. Me, not so much. The bar cars, unfortunately, at a time when we don't have enough seats for all the passengers that are holding tickets on the trains, the bar cars did not have as much seating. They were only used in the afternoons. Several administrations tried to use the bar cars to serve coffee and danishes in the morning, but for union reasons it was just not possible. The bar cars were old. They were falling apart. They were being held together with gaffer's tape, literally. So the last of them were retired, along with many of the other M2, M4, and M6 cars, the older cars that we have. By the end of the year, we will have a brand new fleet of nothing but M8 cars. There is the possibility that somewhere down the line, the Department of Transportation may take one of the newer cars, the M8 car design, and retrofit it to be a bar car, but I'll bet money that that doesn't happen. They're a bit of an anachronism. This is the last railroad in the United States, short of Amtrak, that offers bar cars, and they just never really, they weren't profitable, they were expensive to operate, and they just didn't provide the service that in the old days they might have. Yes?
How does Metro North fund itself, and does it have money for maintenance?
How does Metro North fund itself, and does it have money for maintenance? Well, you know, just to explain the situation, Metro North is hired by the state of Connecticut to run our trains. They are a vendor to the state of Connecticut, and they are paid by the state to run our trains, maintain the tracks, the signals, and the overhead power lines. 2/3 of the fleet of cars that we have is owned by Connecticut, and 1/3 is owned by the state of New York, because those trains also run through Westchester County as well, too. They are funded through the money that is raised by the tickets that you buy, plus a small subsidy from the state of Connecticut. Connecticut's riders on Metro North pay the highest rail fares of any commuter line in the United States, because the subsidy is the lowest. There's a metric called the fare box return. In other words, if you look at the amount, if it costs Metro North $10 to transport you from Westport to New York, 3/4 of that $10 is paid for in your tickets. The other quarter is a subsidy. So the fare box return on Metro North, the percentage of the actual cost of the operation borne by the ticket holders, is about 75%. On the Long Island Railroad, it's closer to 50%. MBTA in Boston is probably 33%. So in other words, the fares on many railroads are kept low to encourage people to use them, and the subsidies are quite high. Ours is just the opposite. Metro North knows it has a captive audience. You really don't have an alternative if you're going to New York City to drive and park. So the fares keep inching up year after year after year. I don't know what it is from, anyone know what monthlies are from Westport now? It's about $350, $370 from Darien, so it's probably closer to $400 a month to buy a monthly ticket. So I hope that answers your question. Yes, ma'am.
You talk about tickets. What are the prospects of us here? You get into the train, you don't have a ticket, you go on your phone, you pay by phone. I've done that in Finland. I don't know why we can do this here.
You can do that in much of the world. That is actually being investigated by Metro North using a third-party app, so that you'll be able to buy your ticket in advance or buy it on the train using your smartphone. You can do that on Amtrak now. You can literally just show your barcode to the Amtrak conductor, he scans it, and you're good to go. So that should be coming. We still don't even accept credit cards on the trains, but that should be possible as well too. Yes, sir.
Back to who pays for what, the box score is interesting, but of that dollar, $10 as you use, is there a portion of that that goes toward capital improvements?
What's the portion of the cost of the operations that go toward capital improvements? I don't know that number, but I'm sure it's going to increase. I think it has been, I mean, the fact that we've had these derailments, these wires down incidents, etc., is an indication that we have not been spending enough on infrastructure. We have not been investing. John, you might know the answer.
The
capital improvements come strictly out of bonding. It's done at the state level. It's got nothing to do with the tickets.
That's right.
And nothing comes from the federal transportation sources.
Whatever money the state can get out of the federal government for various projects, they do. So there is a lot of money that comes in, not nearly as much as there should be.
But the state has allocated that to the rail line between Hartford and Springfield.
That's where a lot of the money is going right now. That's coming from the feds. But everybody needs to understand that Connecticut literally owns the rail, the tracks, the stations, the overhead catenary from the Greenwich line up to New Haven. The rest of this line is owned by the feds. Amtrak owns the line, and they have to take care of it in other places. But here, we own it. It's ours. And that's happened when Metro North was created back in 1983.
John's absolutely right. I mean, there may be an argument to say, does the Department of Transportation really need to be in the railroad business? I mean, we've subbed out, in effect, the operation of our trains. Why do we own this right-of-way? Why don't we sell it to Amtrak? Let them be responsible for maintaining it. I think they give us some money because they do run Amtrak trains over those tracks as well, too.
Yes.
Acela, there's some certain high-speed sidings and things like that. But, you know, it's an expensive investment. Someone here, yeah.
I'm curious, as I understand it, the Connecticut trains have overhead wire and can you explain what that means?
The cars that run on Metro North in Connecticut are of a unique design in that they operate both under the wire here in Connecticut, and then when they're going through about Pelham in Westchester County, those pantographs come down and they operate then under third rail power. One of them is AC, one of them is DC, different voltages. They're much more efficient under the wire here than in terms of acceleration, etc., than the third rail operation. And I would remind you that the fastest trains in the world, the Shinkansen, the TGV, the Eurostar, they all operate under the wire. They don't use third rail. So this is an important technology, but some of the wire, the overhead wire, the catenary that we run our trains under, dates back to the Woodrow Wilson administration. And no wonder it's kind of, you know, brittle and failing. So.
We have time for one more question.
With the suspenders, yeah.
Airplanes and cars are far more reliable, far safer, and far faster than they were 80 years ago. And from your presentation, it looks like railroads have not enjoyed that advantage. Why hasn't technology improved the performance of railroads?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with your premise. I think that depending on what metric you're looking at, passenger miles traveled, airplanes, you know, millions of miles without a fatality. We've just had a string of not bad luck, but the bitter fruit of the uninvestment in our infrastructure. 4 passenger deaths at Boyden Dival, 60 injuries at Fairfield. You know, the commuter action group took a poll of commuters in February just to kind of get a baseline of where people were. You know, do you think the service is getting better? Is it getting worse? Do you think the railroad is safe? And 2/3 of the people said yes. And I think everybody that gets on that train every day assumes it's safe. I mean, I don't hesitate to take the train. I'm not a fatalist. You know, it's not like my number is up or anything. So I think the trains are safe. They just need to be made safer. I don't think there's any reason for any of the accidents that we've seen in the past year. John.
One other comment. Again, Jim just mentioned that some of the infrastructure we're dealing with is 100 to 150 years old. You'd never be able to build a train line the way it is now through all the wetlands that are there. But if you go to China, Jim's been there, they got fabulous trains. They're very safe, and they're very fast, and they're very efficient. So we're stuck with technology that we created a long, long time ago. And there's some of these things are not going to change. We're not going to be able to straighten out the tracks and make it faster. It's not going to happen. If we built a brand new railroad, it would be a different story altogether.
Yeah, I was in China about a year and a half ago. My wife thought we were going to study culture, and I knew we were riding trains. And we took a train from Beijing to Shanghai. And I have a whole other talk I'll do sometime on this. Acela, which runs up and down between Boston and Washington, runs about 1 train an hour, and it carries 300 passengers. We went from Beijing to Shanghai, the distance of New York to Chicago, in 5 hours. on a train that held 1,600 passengers. And those trains left every 10 to 15 minutes. And they were full. They were full. Now, that railroad was built in 2 years. Now, the Chinese can throw a lot of money and personnel and infrastructure at a project like that. And they now have the largest high-speed network in the world. So Ray LaHood, the U.S. Transportation Secretary, went over to China to see what this was like. And he rode the train, and he's drooling, he's foaming at the mouth. It's like, wow, I've been to the mountaintop. But somebody said, well, what do you think of the application of this in the United States? He said, well, it's amazing what you can do in a country where you only need 3 people to make a decision. We're going to go from here to there. If you're in the way, tough. No environmental impact statements, no lawyers, no land rights. Boom, just build it. They build it. I mean, Robert Moses would be smiling in his grave at what the Chinese have accomplished. I'll be glad to hang around afterwards if any of you have questions. Thank you very much for your time and attention.